just the frames. Got keys to kingdom, unlocking chains. Sober the podcast, open up your brains. Sober the podcast, let's get it, man.
Welcome back to Season 4 of Sober the Podcast with the host, Bradley Saxon. And today we're jumping in straight to Step 4, which suggests that we take personal inventory. Let me read the wall step for us. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And so I love that because we are very good at taking other people's inventory, including myself. But what step 4 suggests is that we clean our own side of the street off. And there is a slogan, I guess you could call it a slogan in AA, that is clean house, trust God, help others. And 9 times out of 10, if I could adopt that way of life, I tend to have happiness, joyousness, and freedom. Again, I say that again. So step 4 is adopting a tool. Let's remember this. There's no middle-of-the-road solution for the alcoholic or addict. In other words, I'm either in recovery or I'm not. And so there's no middle-of-the-road solution. We could either blot out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we knew how, or B, accept spiritual help. And so we have people that carry the message to us, that lay this kit of spiritual tools at our feet. It's our decision to pick it up and use it, okay? And so step 4 is one of those tools that will go in our toolkit that can teach us how to grow up, okay? Not just grow with the Lord, but grow in our character. Let's listen to this. I love the wording on page 63 of the big book, how it works. After a man has said the third step prayer, I want to read a few things that I think are very powerful concerning moving into step 4. It says, this was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision, step 3, was a vital and crucial step. And I want you to consider the wording here, vital and crucial step. One of the ways it was described to me is that if someone rips out your vital organs, what happens? You die. So no one's taking away the fact that step 3 is vital. Here's what I need you to understand. Step 3, though vital and crucial, could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us, which takes us back to that battle within that we have to begin to now utilize the help from God to overcome. It says our liquor, drugs was but a symptom. We had to get down to the causes and conditions. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. And so I love the fact that we have wall steps in the meetings, hanging on the wall. I'm going to repeat myself again. Somewhere somebody hung the 12 steps on the wall, but they forgot to put the instructions up there with them. And so this is why we go to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, because in the first 164 pages, the instructions to those wall steps are. And on page 64, it says, a business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke, which is actually the very line that I ended the last episode on. And I love this analogy because it helps us to illustrate or to understand this principle concerning our life. So let's listen. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. So what are the two things that help understand step 4? It's fact-finding, fact-facing. What is a fact? Proven truth. I'm trying to find the facts about the stock in trade. Listen to this. It is an effort to discover the truth. You don't discover the truth unless you search. That's why it's a searching and fearless moral inventory, okay? And in order to search, you've got to dig through some debris, some mess. It's an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damage or unsaleable goods. That is one object. It's not the entire objective, but one object of the searching and fearless moral inventory is to disclose damage or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. So in other words, if I'm running a grocery store and I don't do a personal inventory and I start selling food that's outdated, that's spoiled, what's going to eventually happen is people are going to stop coming to my grocery store. They're going to stop buying the stock in trade, which is what I have on the shelves that brings me profit. And when they stop coming, the customers stop coming, stop buying stop buying my food or whatever the case may be, I have to shut the doors and probably file for bankruptcy because I don't have any money. And so this is the picture that the book is painting us to understand what this inventory is actually going to be in our life. Disclose damage or insoluble goods. Listen, you don't want to sell spoiled milk. This is why you have people who go and rotate milk or look at dates and look, you don't go to the milk. If you run the store and you know that this milk is a product you sell that brings you profit, you're not going to look at outdated milk and have a conversation with it trying to justify how you could keep this on the shelf for 5 more days to make some money. Because in the long run, it's only going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. So typically your objective of the inventory is to get rid of the spoiled milk promptly and without regret, right? I'm not having a conversation with the milk. It's spoiled, it's got to go. But it's amazing when we treat our life like a business and we get to character defects that's caused us a lot of trouble, we try to justify the actions and hold on to them when in actual reality, the pain it's caused makes no sense with what I'm trying to hold on to rather than discovering and getting rid of without regret. Hope that makes some sense. It does to me. It says, if the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. This is very important. I can't afford to hold on to thinking that's caused me problems. I've got to admit it. I've got to acknowledge it is what it is. And when I realize it's unsoluble or damaged, I have to take on the attitude of being willing to get rid of it promptly and without regret. This is the way we've got to start treating our lives concerning the way that we think if we're going to be successful. I mean, I'm preaching real good right now. At least I'm preaching myself happy anyway. Maybe this podcast ain't for you. Maybe it's just to help continue to reveal things or remind me of things that are very powerful concerning my journey in recovery. And man, I just got excited about that, man. I just, some type of clarity just hit me to understand like the objective of a self-searching inventory is to disclose the damaged thinking. And my part in that is to have an attitude of realizing that this is not working, and I've got to promptly be willing to get rid of it if I'm going to be successful. Look at the next verse, or the next paragraph. If you're following along, I'm actually just in How It Works on page 64. It says, we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. I love that. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Here we are, the first inventory in step 4 that we take is resentment. It says resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From its stem, all forms of spiritual disease, for we have not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. For here's the word, when the spiritual malady is overcome, malady meaning sickness, because resentment and fear and guilt and shame make our soul sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Here's the first operation in our first inventory when we take a look at our resentments. Here it is. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. So a lot of people think resentment is people. Typically, we are able to relate resentment to people because resentment typically is a conflict that we have with something or somebody. And so we write down people concerning resentments, but people ain't resentments. People are the thing that's put in place to entice something in me that is broken, and my response to me not getting my way or you getting in the way of what I want is resentment. And so when you live your life playing the actor, you live your life rearranging life to suit yourself, you live your life using people, places, and things in order to bring you joy and happiness and whatever you think it's going to do, what begins to happen is that when people or the people you put in place don't do as you wish, you start getting resentful. And often this resentment can be a reaction that you step on the toes of your fellas, they retaliate, and then you throw them in a bag because now I'm mad at them for what they did to me. And you got 30 of those things when the common denominator in it is you. And so while you are bitter and justifying the 1% of what they did to you, what you have not done is taken a look at why you keep getting put in the same situation with the same kind of people. And so in order to be able to grow, I've got to be able to put out of my mind the wrongs others have done, and I have to look at my own mistakes. And that's the way that I'm going to grow spiritually. That's the way I'm going to master resentment. That's the way I'm going to learn how to think rather than react. This is very, very important when it comes to maturity. I will never mature as long as I react to situations. What does react mean? React means that I am operating on emotion. That when it comes to a particular situation, I do not have the ability to pause, gather facts, and make a rational decision based on truth, that I'm so hurt or I have such pent-up emotion in my life through unresolved issues that when I get hurt or threatened by something or somebody, my first response, and it's almost an it's usually for most people that are as selfish as me, an autopilot response to where I can find myself seeing me from the outside in reacting without any thought or without any, you just do it, and you don't want to do it, but you do it. And so this is probably something that's hitting somebody right now on the head, because you have found that you have no way to tame your tongue, that you say things you don't want to say. You get kicked out of jobs and places because of your resentment. And so it's that you're coming to find that people really dominate you, and that you have no ability to think, that most of what you do is react because your emotional barometer is stuck. And you haven't thought in a long time. You've just really feel. And this is very important that we understand, because the mind does two things. It feels and it thinks. And so if we don't learn how to operate and make the foundation of our life the gathering of facts and the thinking of the things through to find out the truth so I can make decisions, I'm going to be a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. And you put me in the wrong place at the right time, or the right place at the wrong time, whatever you want to say, I'm probably going to end up making a fool out of myself. I might even end up in a fight, getting put out. Who knows? And so when that remorse hits me from the dumb thing I just did that I actually might have blacked out and did because I've got such pent up emotion, then eventually to deal with the guilt and the shame, the moral reflection, the thought of what they think about me is probably drink or use. And this has probably been the scenario of your life for a long time. And so what we're starting to look at in step 4 is that my drinking is a symptom, but if I'm going to overcome drinking, live life away from using drugs and alcohol to fix my problems, then I've got to find out what the real problem is, and I've got to have some coping skills to deal with these emotions, to find a way to learn how to think so that I don't end up pinning up emotions, hurting somebody, justifying anger, unforgiveness, and then wondering why I want to drink alcohol because I'm spiritually sick. My soul is sick, right? This is some good stuff. This is some really good stuff. So here's why we're starting to take a look at this emotional response to life, because we have found ourselves in collision with something or somebody most of the time. And so what we do is we only go as far as looking at what they did to us. We never take a look at how I keep getting connected with these same kind of people, which is there's something in me broken that the enemy uses him to entice, and my own desires keep getting me in conflict with people while I'm walking around with unforgiveness because I'm blaming them for the entire thing, when the truth is there's some responsibility I have to take within my own character that keeps getting me put that I have control over. And so if you're always going to live in, if you're always, I'm getting so excited I can't get it out. The fact is that people who live emotional lives every day tend to turn their life over to people through resentment. And so what eventually happens is you start to become so bitter, it's like drinking poison, hoping that these people die. And so we know that unforgiveness hardens hearts, and hardened hearts, or I like to just say it's just an emotional sickness, right? It's an emotional stronghold to where, I'm not okay, right? And what happens over time is that I just start to slowly fade, and I start using things outside of me to try to eliminate the reality that's in between my ears. And somewhere along the lines, I get so lost, there is no getting out on my own. Like, this is a very important statement that I just made, that we're walking through this step work on this podcast, but the way that I experienced the freedom from it is that a man who had found freedom through it sat down and walked me didactically through it together. Because I had become so lost emotionally and mentally that the thinking that got me into this problem couldn't get me out of it. And I needed someone that was where I was not to give me truth, to help me make the right decisions, to get my life out of the mud. So we write down people in the first column that we were angry with. Look at this. In dealing with resentment, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. And so I'm going to say this. I'm getting a little ahead of myself on this, but I want to say this. Resentment ain't a person, but it's a manifestation of resentment, because resentment typically brings conflict in the earth. My fighting with somebody else is a manifestation that there's an invisible spiritual root that I don't know about that keeps getting me in conflict with people. And the Bible says we don't fight with flesh and blood. So here's what I know instantly when I have conflict with somebody in the earth: they're not my problem. They're not the problem. They may be the vehicle the enemy is using to expose the problem. So if I justify my anger and I don't look at where I'm to blame and I blame them, I'm never going to grow. I'm always going to be right? There's never no room for me to say, man, I'm wrong, right? And that kind of stagnant life only suffocates God's life in me, right? And so in that case, I can talk about God, but I don't really experience the life of God because I'm shut off from the sunlight of the Spirit because of over-reliance upon self. This is why self-awareness is so important, right? We listed institutions or principles with whom we were angry. So what we're learning is that we're starting with the conflict, the visible spirit, the visible physical fruit. We're starting with the visible physical fruit. Why? So we can take each column to get down to the invisible spiritual root. So you live it from right to left, you inventory it from left to right. So in other words, I start with the conflict in the earth, but that ain't where it started. It started in the spiritual, but in order to get to the spiritual invisible root, I've got to start with the visible physical fruit. That's a mouthful. But the way that I just, what recovery is as I change my altitude, becoming spiritually, consciously connected to God, what I'm learning to do is now He's given me the power to change the way that I think. And now I'm changing the way that I think according to where I'm seated. Oh, this is good. So in step 3, I took a position. I'm seated in a heavenly realm. Well, I'm still blocked from God because I'm relying upon self. So as I work steps 4 through 9, I come to the reality of where I'm seated in a heavenly realm. Well, now I'm going to operate in the earth according to where I'm seated, not where I'm living. And this is what brings the reality of heaven on earth for me. And this is what allows God to use me to usher heaven into earth as I approach problems through a spiritual perspective. And this is what the 4th step is helping me do, take on a new pair of glasses, because the way that I'm viewing things is from an earthly realm. I'm operating as an earthling. But what happens when I get reborn in step 3, 4 through 9 does not bring about the change. 4 through 9 helps me to discover what's already been done. My God. So I take the position in step 3, but I go right back to the same condition because I can't over spiritualize the initial work of step 3 to take away from the condition I brought to it. This is good. So I'm reborn, right? But here's the truth. I don't think on that level yet. And so I'm trying to find the thinking that makes me operate as an earthling, even though yesterday I got rocketed into a 4th dimension. And the reality is I'm a heavenly being having an earthly experience, but would never have that reality or that truthful or that experience in the earth if I didn't find the thinking that blocks me from dealing with my problems according to carnal things. Like the Bible says, 2 Corinthians 10:4, that we don't wage war like the world wages war, that we don't use the weapons of this world's warfare. Why? Because they're not powerful to break strongholds. So when I equip myself in step 4 to deal with resentments through a spiritual perspective, now I'm fighting my battles with the weapons of God's warfare that are powerful to break these strongholds in my mind that keeps keeping me in the cycle of, misery and depression and unforgiveness and bitter and justification. Like, this is the thing that He's equipping me to deal with life in a spiritual sense. So we're writing down the people. We're going to start with the conflict, and then the next column is we're going to ask ourselves why we were angry. Okay, so girlfriend, that's who I've got a resentment at. Well, after I've wrote down all my resentments, so what I would do is I would columnize this, and I would do it like a grocery list, and I would go first and I'd write down my resentments towards people, institutions, or principles. And as I list these, I will leave about 4 lines on a piece of paper in between them, knowing that I've got another column that I'm going to have to ask questions about these relationships, right? And so let's say I'm done with all the people, the institutions, and principles. I'm going to go to the second column, and I'm going to answer this like a grocery list, and I'm going to ask myself why we were angry. So if the first one's dad, mom, employer, whatever, I'm going to go to the next column, and I'm going to ask myself, why am I angry? Notice Jesus did this with Jonah. If you go to Jonah chapter 4, there's 4 chapters in Jonah. In the end, this is so good. Jonah is being used by God, right? In the beginning, he's running from God. God sends a whale, swallows him up. Jonah can't see himself, man. But God sends a whale, swallows him up, sends him to the other side where he's going. Then you see in 2 and 3, Jonah preaches to the people. Now, this is important because Jonah's running from God's plan because Jonah don't want to preach a message that set him free to the people that had hurt his people. Come on now. Listen, you can be saved and be petty. And Jonah was a petty prophet, though his gifting set people free, he wasn't. Spiritual giftingness does not equal peace and freedom. Spiritual mindedness does. And you can go your whole life using your gift to help people while you're not free. And what you find is through the whole book of Jonah, even though he preached to Nineveh and they all repented, you find in Jonah 4, he's still miserable and mad because the people that hurt his people were being set free. And he didn't like it. He was bitter. He was bitter. And so this is why I talk about self-awareness, is because we can go our whole entire life walking with God, going to church, and not being free. We can be delivered. Yes, the reality of being out of darkness into marvelous light is a reality. But when I don't change the way that I think through surrendering and following Jesus daily, I can become bitter, even preach and help people and be bitter. And I don't want to be, and nor do you want to be. And so we're trying to put this kit of spiritual, this inventory in our kit of spiritual tools so that we can keep a checkup from the neck up. I like to say check up from the neck up, to change our thinking, our attitude, to control the things God has given us the ability to control. So the aroma on our life is just as sweet as when we preach. Right? And so Jonah finds himself not wanting to forgive. And I mean, think about being called by God to do something and actually running from what God wants you to do for one reason. I don't want the people that hurt my people to have the same forgiveness that I do. That was the whole reason that he did not go first to Nineveh and to preach. He fled to Tarshish. Why? Because he didn't want to give the forgiveness that God freely gave him. And so when you look at Jonah's life, he's an example of someone who could do great things for the Lord, but never experience the reality of what he's preaching to people. Because this reality takes investigation to take ownership of where I'm to blame, turn to God to clean off my side of the street so that I could receive the forgiveness. And when I receive this forgiveness for the inexcusable things that I have done, it becomes very hard not to extend that forgiveness for the inexcusable things other people have done. And so these, that's an intentional experience. You don't experience freedom in the soul without intentionality. You have to be intentional on searching yourself to find the things that block you from God, right? And resentment is something we see even throughout the Bible that plagued God's people. And so we're asking ourselves why we were angry, and this is what he did to Jonah. Jonah's complaining about the people, and this is what God wants to know. Jonah, is clear you're angry. Let's get down to why you're angry. Because when you start thinking about why you're angry, it starts becoming real petty, because it ain't really plausible concerning what God has done for you, right? And so when you start getting down to the why, you start to feel a little silly of these things that you've been harboring. And so once you get that down, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go into the third column, which in most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. So in other words, this person's actions threatened my financial security. It threatened my ambitions. And each instinct, whether it be sexual, security, emotional or financial, or social, which is your personal relationships, each one of those instincts has ambitions, which is I have selfish ambitions to get the reward from these instincts met through people, right? So what we find is the conflict in the earth is usually from the unrealistic expectations I have on people to meet needs that only God can. And so when you start to get a little deeper than the conflict, you start to realize the conflict is coming from something in you that has not been dealt with God, that you're still looking to people to do. And when people don't do it, you're responding to life the way you used to. And so now that God has brought you out of darkness into light, he's actually allowing the light to start to confront some of the belief systems that you have that's causing your trouble and in extinguishing your freedom or the reality of what he saved you for. And so these are the uncomfortable positions we get in as Christians that we have to embrace, because it's these moments that are really producing the oil that we need in order to be powerful in the earth, right? And so I'm having to now in step or column 3, now I'm having to look at what this conflict, where it began. I'm having to take a look at what instinct was affected. And so once I get these 3 things down, let's look at the next instruction. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations, which have been interfered with? Why am I looking at this? Because step 3 said we had to quit playing God. Why? Because it didn't work. Well, if playing God is what keeps me in collision with something or somebody, now I'm looking how to master resentment by changing the way that I think, by honoring the commitment of surrendering and abandoning myself to God, and now turning my will and life over to him. Now I can't respond to these situations the way I used to, because I'm investigating the situation to see why I'm in it in the first place, so that I can come up with a resolution that helps me not to continue to be in collision with people, places, or things. I mean, that's a third shift job, man. I remember like yesterday always having to be mad at somebody or fight something because it's getting in the way of what I want, my plans, right? And so once we get all 3 of these columns down, the book says we were usually as definite as this example. And if you don't have a big book, you can see here that on page 65, it shows you the 3 columns here and the examples. Now, you will go into the next. I didn't learn what I'm about to tell you. I didn't learn until I was 2 years sober. And I will say that if you hear what I'm about to say and you didn't do it this way the first time, this is not me telling you you did it wrong. This is me hoping to reveal something to you new, that the next time you do it, you would have a deeper experience. Because what I found is when I did it the first time based on what I knew, I got the experience that I was looking for. And that when I grew a deeper understanding through continuing to follow this path, it helped me to have a deeper experience. So what I'm about to show you, if it's something you've never been taught or seen, it's not to say that you did it wrong, right? It's not to say your sponsor sucks. It's just to simply, hopefully, bring you a deeper understanding that next time you can maybe experience a deeper experience with seeing yourself in a way that you've never seen it before, okay? And so that next part is going to be what I call considering the first 3 columns thoroughly or carefully. Listen to this, bottom of 65. We went back through our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, at this juncture, we've not written the whole 4th column. So therefore, we don't have a completed 4th step concerning resentments. So when it says we were finished, we considered it carefully, is telling me that at this juncture, there is an instruction that I must do with what I've already got written. And if above it says we were usually as definite as this example, there is a transition between the 3rd operation and the 4th operation that I feel like is very important, because this is where you take this program from being a self-help program to being a God-driven program, because the next 2 pages is going to help you consider carefully the fact that this is something you can't fix, and this is where you need God's help, and it's about to lend you to prayer and the power of it to change things, which is not the way that we have fought our battles in the past. And so therefore, I think that this next transition into the fourth column is what's going to allow me to have a deeper release of the people that I've been harboring ill feelings for. It's going to give me the ability to turn the tables and start to want to treat them the way that I would want to be treated. It's going to start helping me have compassion, love, and tolerance to their shortcomings. And ultimately, it's going to teach me to forgive, let go. And when I do that, it's going to empower me to be an agent for God and his kingdom in the earth, okay? And so what we need to do is we need to consider these first three columns. And so you're going to have to tune in again to hear, how do I consider these first three columns carefully? Until next time. Sheesh.